The air was thick with desperation in downtown Portland, a familiar feeling to Sophia Reed as she rearranged the wilting vegetables at Harvest Community Food Bank. The small brick building on Morrison Street hummed with quiet conversation and the soft scraping of plastic trays, a symphony of need that had become the soundtrack to her life. At 26, Sophia was a shadow of the nutritional science prodigy she once was, a top student at Westridge University who'd been forced to abandon her dreams when her mother's medical bills bankrupted their family. "Sophia, we're running low on the protein options again," called Marcus, the food bank's director, his voice gentle but strained. "Can you stretch what we have for another hour?" "I'll figure something out," she replied, wiping her brow with the back of her hand. Her fingers, once steady in research labs analyzing nutrient compositions, now divided meager portions of beans and lentils with mathematical precision, ensuring no one went completely without. The work was honorable, but the irony wasn't lost on her, a nutrition expert who often went hungry herself, skipping meals so others could eat. At night, she studied her old textbooks by lamplight in the tiny apartment she shared with her mother, whose rheumatoid arthritis had worsened since they lost their health insurance. The $140,000 in medical debt hung over them like a storm cloud that never passed. The food bank's door swung open, letting in a blast of autumn chill, and a man whose tailored charcoal suit made him look as out of place as a peacock among pigeons. Alexander Donovan, CEO of NutraSolutions, had a reputation that preceded him, a ruthless businessman whose company had revolutionized meal replacement technology. His products promised to solve world hunger, while his profit margins suggested feeding the wealthy was more lucrative. Sophia watched him warily as he surveyed the food bank, his steel-grey eyes cataloguing every detail. When those eyes landed on her, she straightened instinctively. "You're in charge of nutrition here?" he asked, his voice clipped and commanding. "I manage the food distribution," she answered cautiously, wondering why a billionaire was standing in her food bank on a Tuesday afternoon. "I need someone who understands balanced nutrition to review these," he said, gesturing to an assistant who produced a tablet displaying formulas. "We're donating meal packets. I want them distributed properly." Sophia glanced at the screen, her trained eye immediately spotting inconsistencies in the nutritional balance. Without thinking, she pointed to the formula. "These calcium levels are too high for children, and there's insufficient B12 for elderly recipients. The protein ratio is off too." Alexander's eyebrows rose slightly. "And you know this how?" "I have a background in nutritional science," she said simply, not offering more. His eyes narrowed, reassessing her. "Fix it then. We need these formulations finalized by tomorrow." Before she could object, dizziness swept through her, a familiar sensation after 2 days of surviving on black coffee and half a protein bar. The room tilted, voices becoming distant as her blood sugar plummeted. She gripped the edge of the table, but it wasn't enough. Her knees buckled. The last thing Sophia remembered was the startled expression on Alexander Donovan's face as he lunged forward to catch her before she hit the floor, his expensive cologne filling her senses as consciousness slipped away. The irony didn't escape her, even as darkness closed in. A nutrition expert fainting from hunger in the arms of a man who'd made billions feeding the world. Sophia regained consciousness to the gentle hum of engines and the sensation of floating. Her eyes fluttered open to reveal polished wood paneling and cream leather seats. This wasn't the food bank with its fluorescent lights and linoleum floors. Her heart raced as she struggled to orient herself. "She's awake," a woman's voice said, softly. Sophia turned to see a uniformed flight attendant standing in a narrow aisle. Beyond her, through an oval window, clouds drifted by. She was on a plane, no, a private jet, the kind she'd only seen in magazines or movies. "Where am I?" she asked, her voice hoarse as she attempted to sit up. "Where are you taking me?" "You're on Mr. Donovan's private jet," the attendant replied, handing her a glass of orange juice. "Please drink this. Your blood sugar is dangerously low." The memories rushed back. The food bank, Alexander Donovan asking about nutrition formulas, the room spinning as her knees gave out. Embarrassment flooded her cheeks with heat. "Why am I here? I need to get back to work," Sophia said, though she drank the juice, unable to ignore her body's desperate need for glucose. Mr. Donovan insisted, "You lost consciousness." He carried you himself to the car and then to the jet. The doctor said you're severely malnourished. Doctor, Sophia noticed an older man in the corner of the cabin, organizing medical supplies in a black bag. He nodded at her with professional detachment. "You've been running on empty for quite some time, young lady," he said. "Chronic malnutrition, dehydration and exhaustion. Not what I'd expect from someone with nutritional science expertise." Before Sophia could respond, the door to the cockpit opened and Alexander Donovan stepped into the cabin. Up close, he seemed even more imposing. Tall with broad shoulders, dark hair threaded with silver at the temples, and those penetrating grey eyes that seemed to miss nothing. "Welcome back," he said, his voice less sharp than it had been at the food bank. "How are you feeling?" "Confused," Sophia replied honestly. "And uncomfortable. I appreciate the help, but you can't just kidnap people." Alexander's lips quirked, almost a smile but not quite. "Is that what you think this is? A kidnapping? What would you call it when someone wakes up on a stranger's private jet without consent? I'd call it preventing a lawsuit. You collapsed on my watch. I have excellent lawyers who'd advise against leaving unconscious women on food bank floors." He sat in the leather seat opposite her. "Besides, you intrigued me. Not many people would spot flaws in our formulas at a glance." Sophia sipped the juice, feeling strength slowly returning to her limbs. "Where are we going?" "San Francisco, NutraSolutions headquarters. We have a nutrition lab there where you can properly review the meal packet formulations. After that, you're free to go back to Portland with compensation for your time." "My mother needs me," Sophia said. "She's ill. I can't just disappear." Alexander nodded to his assistant, a slim woman who had materialized silently beside him. "Janice has already contacted your mother. We've arranged for home care during your absence. Premium service, fully covered." "You had no right." "Perhaps not," he interrupted, "but I need someone with both technical knowledge and practical experience distributing food to the hungry. You have both. One day of your expertise could improve formulations that feed millions." Sophia studied him, trying to read past the businessman exterior. Was this genuine concern for global nutrition, or was Alexander Donovan simply trying to improve his corporate image? The cynical part of her suspected the latter, but the scientist in her couldn't ignore the opportunity to influence formulations that might reach people like those she served daily. "One day," she agreed reluctantly, "and then I go home. With the meal packets for our food bank." Alexander's expression remained unreadable, but he nodded once. "Deal. Now eat something substantial. There's a proper meal being prepared." "The doctor says you've been starving yourself." "Not by choice," Sophia muttered, but he had already turned away, leaving her with the strange sensation that her life had just veered dramatically off course, heading towards something she couldn't yet see on the horizon. NutraSolutions headquarters rose like a gleaming monolith against the San Francisco skyline, all glass and steel with the company's distinctive leaf logo illuminated at its crown. Sophia felt small and out of place as Alexander escorted her through the lobby, her simple clothes, jeans and a faded green sweater, a stark contrast to the immaculate business attire surrounding them. Security guards nodded deferentially as they passed, and employees stepped aside, their curious glances following Sophia like silent questions. "Everyone's staring," she whispered, uncomfortable under the scrutiny. "I rarely bring visitors directly to the labs," Alexander replied without slowing his stride, "especially not ones I carry onto my jet." Sophia winced. "Has the company rumor mill already spun that into something scandalous?" The corner of his mouth twitched. "Undoubtedly. Does that bother you?" "I'm more concerned with formulating proper nutrition for hungry people than corporate gossip," she answered honestly, squaring her shoulders. Something flickered in Alexander's eyes. Approval, perhaps. He led her into an elevator that required his thumbprint to access. The nutrition labs are on the 32nd floor, state-of-the-art equipment, best research team in the industry. The elevator ascended silently, and Sophia used the moment to study Alexander surreptitiously. Up close, the hard edges of his public persona seemed slightly softened. There were faint lines around his eyes that spoke of more than just business concerns. She wondered what drove a man like him. Profit, power, or something else entirely. The lab was a scientist's dream. Gleaming countertops, advanced analytical equipment, and floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the bay. A team of researchers in white coats looked up in unison as they entered, their expressions shifting from curiosity to surprise when Alexander introduced Sophia. "This is Sophia Reed. She'll be consulting on the Humanitarian meal packet formulations. Give her complete access to the data and samples." A woman with a sleek ponytail and sharp eyes stepped forward. "Mr. Donovan, with all due respect, these formulations have already passed through multiple review stages. We're on deadline for production, and yet Miss Reed identified 3 critical flaws in less than 10 seconds, Alexander replied coolly. "What does that say about our review process, Dr. Winters?" Dr. Winters' gaze hardened as she assessed Sophia. "What are your credentials?" Before Sophia could answer, Alexander interjected. "Miss Reed has practical experience distributing nutrition in crisis situations, something our team lacks, despite their impressive degrees." Sophia felt the weight of expectation settling on her shoulders. These people with their PhDs and corporate salaries wouldn't respect her unfinished education or food bank experience. She would need to prove herself, quickly. "I'd like to see your target demographic profiles," she said, addressing Dr. Winters directly, "and the complete nutritional breakdown of the current formulation." Dr. Winters hesitated, glancing at Alexander, who nodded once before stepping away. "I have meetings. Dr. Winters will provide whatever you need. I'll check on your progress." This evening, left alone with the research team, Sophia took a deep breath and stepped into the lion's den. Dr. Winters reluctantly handed her a tablet containing the data, her skepticism evident in every gesture. "These packets are designed to be universal," she explained with forced politeness. "One formulation to address global malnutrition efficiently." Sophia scrolled through the profiles, her brow furrowing. "That's your first mistake. Universal nutrition doesn't exist. A malnourished child in East Africa has different needs than an elderly homeless person in Portland. We can't customize for every scenario," Dr. Winters countered. "It's not cost-effective." "It's not effective, period," Sophia replied, setting the tablet down. "Show me your samples and your testing protocols." As the day progressed, Sophia's initial discomfort faded, replaced by the familiar confidence that came with working in her element. She identified deficiencies in iron levels for menstruating women, insufficient caloric density for those with limited access to multiple meals, and cultural insensitivities in the flavor profiles that would reduce acceptance in various regions. By evening, she had reorganized their approach entirely, suggesting 3 base formulations instead of 1, with minor regional modifications that would add negligible cost but significant nutritional impact. The research team, initially resistant, began to watch her work with grudging respect. The laboratory's bright lights still blazed at 9 p.m. as Sophia hunched over a microscope, examining the micronutrient distribution in a sample paste. Most of the research team had departed hours ago, leaving behind sidelong glances ranging from curiosity to resentment. Only Dr. Winters remained, her initial hostility having mellowed to professional wariness as she witnessed Sophia's undeniable expertise. The zinc and iron separation is still causing absorption issues, Sophia murmured, making notes on a tablet. We need to adjust the binding agent. That would require recalibrating the entire production line, Dr. Winters replied, crossing her arms. The board won't approve that kind of delay. Sophia looked up from the microscope, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. What good is meeting a production deadline if the product fails its primary purpose? These packets are supposed to prevent malnutrition, not merely create the illusion of addressing it. The laboratory door slid open before Dr. Winters could respond. Alexander Donovan entered, his suit jacket draped over one arm, tie loosened, small. Concessions to the late hour that somehow failed to diminish his commanding presence. It's nearly 10 o'clock, he observed, surveying the lab. I expected to find you finished hours ago. Nutrition isn't something you rush, Sophia replied, without looking up from her notes. Not when lives depend on it. A silence followed, prompting her to finally raise her eyes. Alexander was studying her with an unreadable expression. Dr. Winters shifted uncomfortably beside her. Dr. Winters, would you excuse us? Alexander requested, though his tone made it clear it wasn't truly a question. When they were alone, Alexander approached Sophia's workstation, examining the array of samples she had prepared. You've been busy. Your formulation needed more work than I initially thought, she said frankly. The single universal approach was fundamentally flawed. I've developed 3 base formulations instead, one for children under 12, one for adolescents and adults, and one for elderly or immunocompromised individuals. That triples production complexity. It doubles effectiveness at only a 15% cost increase, she countered. I've accounted for that in the manufacturing process redesign. Alexander picked up her tablet, scrolling through her detailed notes and recommendations. His eyebrows rose slightly as he read, You redesigned our manufacturing process too. Sophia felt a flicker of uncertainty. Had she overstepped? I worked in a food processing plant during undergrad. The principles are similar, just scaled differently. He set down the tablet and fixed her with that penetrating gaze. You keep surprising me, Miss Reed. First nutritional science, now manufacturing expertise. What else are you hiding beneath that food bank apron? I'm not hiding anything, she replied, suddenly aware of how close he was standing. Unlike some, I don't have the luxury of using my full potential. I use whatever skills I have wherever they're needed. What happened? He asked quietly. Your knowledge base suggests advanced education, yet you're working at a food bank. Sophia turned away, focusing on organizing her samples rather than meeting his eyes. Life happened. Medical bills specifically. My mother has rheumatoid arthritis. Insurance denied coverage for the experimental treatment she needed. By the time we found alternatives, we were drowning in debt, so you left school to work. I left Westridge University 3 credits short of my master's in nutritional biochemistry, she admitted, the old bitterness resurfacing. Traded research. Labs for food banks. It's still nutrition, just different applications. Alexander was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice had lost some of its sharpness. Your recommendations are impressive, Miss Reed. I'd like to implement them. Sophia looked up in surprise. All of them? Even the production line modifications? Especially those. Efficiency without effectiveness is worthless. He gestured toward the door. It's late. There's a company apartment where you can stay tonight. Tomorrow, we'll present your findings to the board. The board? Sophia echoed, her stomach tightening. I was supposed to be here for 1 day. My mother is being well cared for. Alexander completed her sentence. I've arranged for her care to continue through the week. 1 more day, Miss Reed. These changes need your advocacy. Sophia hesitated. She was exhausted, hungry again despite the meal on the plane, and desperately needed a shower. But the opportunity to influence nutrition for potentially millions of vulnerable people wasn't something she could walk away from. Fine, she conceded. 1 more day. The company apartment proved to be a luxurious condo in a high-rise overlooking the bay. Sophia stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing at the glittering city lights below, feeling untethered from her normal life. The kitchen was stocked with food that would feed a family for a week. The bathroom featured a shower with multiple jets and toiletries that cost more than her monthly grocery budget. She showered and changed into the clothes that had mysteriously appeared in the bedroom. Simple but elegant attire in exactly her size. As she picked at a plate of food at the dining table, she couldn't help wondering about Alexander Donovan. The ruthless CEO seemed at odds with the man who had carried her onto his private jet when she fainted, who listened to her recommendations without dismissing them, who ensured her mother was cared for in her absence. What did he truly want from her? And why did the question make her heart beat faster in a way that had nothing to do with fear? The NutraSolutions boardroom embodied corporate power in every detail. A massive table of polished walnut, ergonomic chairs upholstered in genuine leather, and a sweeping view of San Francisco Bay through windows that adjusted their tint automatically with the sun's movement. Sophia stood before a room full of executives, all wearing expressions ranging from skepticism to thinly veiled impatience as she presented her findings and recommendations. In summary, she concluded, gesturing to the final slide showing comparative effectiveness graphs, the 3-tiered formulation approach increases nutritional efficacy by 68%, while raising production costs by only 15%. The investment pays for itself when you consider reduced waste from regional rejection and improved health outcomes. Silence followed her presentation. Sophia fought the urge to fidget under the scrutiny of 12 pairs of eyes. She'd worn the provided outfit, a simple navy dress with a tailored blazer, but still felt conspicuously out of place among these polished executives in their designer attire. A silver-haired man at the far end of the table cleared his throat. Impressive analysis, Miss Reed, but entirely impractical. We've already invested millions in the current production setup. Shareholders expect the Humanitarian line to launch next quarter. With respect, Mr. Harrington, Alexander interjected from his position at the head of the table, I believe Miss Reed has demonstrated that launching an inferior product would be the greater risk to shareholder value. Since when do you prioritize nutritional idealism over market positioning, Alex? Asked a woman with sharp features and a British accent. This humanitarian line is primarily about entering developing markets, not charity. Sophia's stomach clenched at the naked cynicism. You're marketing these as life-saving nutrition, not as a market entry strategy, she said before she could stop herself. The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees. The British woman, Sophia had gathered her name, was Victoria Pierce, Chief Marketing Officer, fixed her with a glacial stare. How refreshing to have someone explain our business to us, Victoria said, her smile never reaching her eyes. Perhaps you'd like to cover our quarterly projections next? That's enough, Victoria. Alexander's voice cut through the tension. Miss Reed speaks from expertise. She's improved our formulation significantly, and I've already approved the manufacturing. Modifications. Murmurs rippled around the table. Sophia noticed several board members exchanging glances. This wasn't the Alexander Donovan they expected. Without board approval? Mr. Harrington asked, his bushy eyebrows drawing together. As CEO, I have discretionary authority over product improvements, Alexander replied coolly. The changes are already underway. Victoria's perfectly manicured nails tapped an irritated rhythm on the table. And who exactly is Miss Reed? What are her credentials that justify such unprecedented influence? Alexander glanced at Sophia, a silent question in his eyes. She straightened her shoulders, deciding that honesty was her only viable strategy. I was 3 credits short of completing my master's in nutritional biochemistry at Westridge University when financial circumstances forced me to withdraw, she said evenly. For the past 4 years, I've managed nutrition programs at Portland's Harvest Community Food Bank, serving approximately 800 vulnerable individuals weekly. So, not a completed degree and no corporate experience, Victoria summarized, with a dismissive wave. Hardly the expert we should be rebuilding production lines for. Academic credentials aren't the only measure of expertise, Alexander said, standing. Miss Reed identified critical flaws that our entire research team missed. Her practical experience distributing nutrition to vulnerable populations gives her insights none of us possess. The boardroom door opened, and Dr. Winters entered, carrying a tablet. She nodded briefly to Alexander before addressing the room. We've completed the preliminary testing on Miss Reed's revised formulations, she announced, her professional tone not quite masking her reluctance. The results confirm her projections. Bioavailability of key nutrients is increased by 73% in the age-specific formulations compared to our original universal approach. Sophia felt a surge of vindication, which was quickly tempered. When Victoria spoke again, testing overseen by whom? Our team has suddenly become quite accommodating to this consultant. I supervised the testing personally, Dr. Winters replied stiffly. The methodology was rigorous and the results are reproducible. Alexander moved to stand beside Sophia, a subtle show of solidarity that didn't go unnoticed by the board. The decision is made. We're implementing Miss Reed's recommendations. The production adjustments are already underway. Mr. Harrington sighed heavily. This is most irregular, Alex. What exactly is your interest in Miss Reed's approach? Or perhaps, he added with a knowing glance between Sophia and Alexander, your interest lies elsewhere. The insinuation hung in the air, causing Sophia's cheeks to flush with indignation. Before she could respond, Alexander's voice cut through the room, cold as steel. My interest, Richard, is in not watching our company release a substandard product that fails the very people it claims to help. If you're suggesting anything else, I recommend reconsidering. His tone made it clear that the subject was closed. As the board members filed out after the meeting, Sophia remained rooted in place, processing the dynamic she had just witnessed. Alexander had defended her, championed her recommendations, and essentially staked his professional reputation on her expertise, all while barely knowing her. Why did you do that? She asked when they were alone in the boardroom. You undermined your own board for my recommendations. Alexander turned to face her, his expression unreadable. Because you were right, and in my experience, that's rare. Enough to be worth protecting. The following days blurred together as Sophia found herself unexpectedly embedded in NutraSolutions' operation. What had begun as a one-day consultation stretched into a week as Alexander insisted her oversight, was crucial during the implementation phase. Each morning, a sleek company car delivered her to headquarters, where she divided her time between the laboratory and the manufacturing facility 40 minutes outside San Francisco. Dr. Winters had shifted from open hostility to grudging professional respect, particularly after Sophia identified a potential allergen interaction that had slipped past the entire research team. The production engineers, initially resistant to an outsider's suggestions, now sought her input on the line modifications, impressed by her practical understanding of both the science and mechanical constraints. Sophia called her mother daily, reassured by reports that the home health care provided by Alexander was exceptional. Still, the nagging sense that she was being kept at NutraSolutions for reasons beyond her expertise grew stronger, especially when Alexander began inviting her to join him for working dinners to discuss implementation strategies. On Thursday evening, they sat in his private dining room adjacent to his office, the remains of an excellent meal between them as they reviewed production timelines. The San Francisco skyline glittered beyond the windows, a breathtaking backdrop that Sophia still hadn't grown accustomed to. "The pediatric formulation can begin production next Wednesday," she said, swiping through specifications on her tablet. "The adult and elderly formulations will follow at 3-day intervals. That staggers the line reconfiguration efficiently." Alexander nodded, studying her rather than the tablet. "You've transformed our entire approach in less than a week. The team that resisted you now consults you on every decision." Sophia set down the tablet, suddenly aware of the intimacy of their setting. Soft lighting, expensive wine she'd barely touched, and Alexander's undivided attention. They're good scientists. They just needed perspective from the ground level, from someone who's actually watched people struggle with malnutrition. "A perspective you have because of your circumstances," he observed. "Your misfortune became your unique qualification. I wouldn't call watching my mother suffer while I abandoned my education fortunate," she replied, an edge creeping into her voice. Alexander leaned forward, his expression softening. "That's not what I meant. I admire how you've transformed hardship into expertise. Most would have become bitter." "Who says I'm not?" Sophia challenged, meeting his gaze directly. "I was 3 credits away from a degree that would have opened doors to labs like yours. Instead, I portion out dented cans of beans and calculate how to stretch donations to feed as many hungry people as possible. And yet when given access to our lab, you didn't waste a moment on resentment. You immediately improved formulations that our highest-paid experts had declared finished." He refilled her water glass, a surprisingly humble gesture from a man accustomed to being served. "That's rare, Sophia." The use of her first name sent an unexpected warmth through her chest. Throughout the week she'd been Miss Reed in his formal address. "I've arranged for you to finish your degree," he said casually, as though announcing a minor schedule change rather than a life-altering intervention. Sophia froze, the water glass halfway to her lips. "What?" "I've spoken with the Dean of Nutritional Sciences at Westridge. Your outstanding credits can be completed through independent study while you continue your work here. NutraSolutions will cover all expenses." He continued before she could respond. "Additionally, I've had our legal team review your mother's medical bills. The hospital overcharged significantly and failed to apply available assistance programs. We're negotiating a substantial reduction." Emotions collided within Sophia. Gratitude, suspicion, hope, and a fierce pride that bristled at charity. "Why would you do this?" she asked, setting down her glass carefully before her shaking hands could betray her. "What do you want from me?" Alexander's expression shifted, a momentary vulnerability breaking through his composed exterior. "Is it so difficult to believe I recognize exceptional talent worth investing in?" "Yes," she answered honestly. "Men like you don't build empires through charitable impulses. There's always a calculation." He leaned back, studying her with those penetrating grey eyes. "Very well. The calculation is this. NutraSolutions needs someone who understands both the science and the human reality of nutrition. Someone who sees beyond profit margins to actual impact. I want you to head our new Humanitarian Nutrition division." Sophia's breath caught. You can't be serious. I don't have the credentials or corporate experience. You'll have your degree within months. As for experience, he gestured to the tablet displaying the revolutionary changes she'd implemented. You've demonstrated more valuable insight in 1 week than most executives offer in a year. Suspicion still lingered beneath her surprise. The board would never approve this appointment. Victoria Pierce made her opinion of me quite clear. A shadow crossed Alexander's face. Victoria's concerns are irrelevant. Her judgment is compromised by personal history. Personal history? Sophia repeated, sensing a story beneath his careful words. Alexander sighed, rotating his water glass slowly between his fingers. Victoria and I were engaged 3 years ago. She expected to advance through personal connection rather than merit. When I ended our relationship, her professional ambition turned to resentment. "So I'm caught in your corporate power struggle?" Sophia asked, the pieces falling into place. "Is that why you've kept me here, to antagonize your ex-fiancé?" "That's unfair," Alexander replied, his voice sharpening. "Your recommendations stand on their merit alone. Victoria's opposition is the irrelevant factor, not your presence." Before Sophia could respond, his office door opened without a knock. Dr. Winters entered, her expression unusually grave. "Mr. Donovan, we have a problem," she announced. "The first test batch of the pediatric formulation is showing abnormal results. Potential contamination." Alexander was immediately on his feet. "How? The facility is state-of-the-art." "Unknown. But given the timing and the specific nature of the contamination," Dr. Winters' eyes flicked briefly to Sophia, "it appears deliberate." The implication hung heavy in the air. Sophia felt the blood drain from her face as Alexander turned to her, his expression hardening. "Someone sabotaged the production?" he asked Dr. Winters, his voice dangerously quiet. "The evidence suggests it. The contaminant was introduced in a way that required intimate knowledge of the new formulation." Dr. Winters handed him a tablet displaying chemical analysis results. "Only a handful of people had that level of access." Sophia stood, her heart pounding. "You think I did this, after spending a week perfecting these formulations?" Alexander's face had become an unreadable mask. "I don't know what to think, Miss Reed. But as you pointed out earlier, I didn't become CEO through naive trust." The warmth that had been building between them evaporated, replaced by a chill that cut Sophia to the bone. She'd begun to believe he saw her differently, valued her for her mind rather than what she could do for his company image. Now, in an instant, she was just another suspect, another potential threat to his corporate empire. "I would never sabotage. Nutrition meant for children," she said, her voice shaking with suppressed anger. "Never." "We'll investigate thoroughly," Alexander replied, his tone suddenly formal. "In the meantime, your access to the lab and production facility is suspended pending review." Dr. Winters wouldn't meet her eyes as security was called to escort Sophia back to the company apartment. As she was led away, she caught a glimpse of Victoria Pierce watching from the corridor, a satisfied smile playing at the corners of her perfectly painted lips. Sophia paced the luxurious confines of the company apartment, feeling more prisoner than guest. Security guards, politely but firmly positioned outside her door, informed her that she was welcome to stay comfortable until the investigation concluded. The polished corporate speak couldn't disguise the reality. She was effectively under house arrest. Her phone had been confiscated for security review, cutting her off from her mother and the outside world. The apartment's landline allowed only internal calls within the NutraSolutions building. When she tried Marcus at the food bank, the call wouldn't connect. Night fell over San Francisco, city lights painting patterns across the apartment walls. As Sophia sat at the dining table, papers spread before her. She'd spent hours reconstructing the production process from memory, annotating each step where contamination could have been introduced. The methodical analysis kept panic at bay, giving her mind something to focus on besides Alexander's cold dismissal. The contamination had to be deliberate. The security protocols at the production facility were too stringent for accidents of that magnitude. But the list of people with both the knowledge and access to execute such sabotage was painfully short, and Sophia couldn't deny she was at the top. She'd personally overseen the reformulation, specified the new ingredient ratios, and spent more time on the production floor than anyone except the facility manager. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it cautiously to find an unexpected visitor, James Chen, one of the junior production engineers who had worked closely with her on implementing the manufacturing changes. "They're letting you have visitors?" she asked, surprised. James glanced nervously down the hall. "Not exactly. I told security I needed to retrieve data files you had. May I come in?" Sophia stepped aside, letting him enter. James was young, perhaps, fresh out of graduate school, with an earnest face that made him look even younger than his probable 25 years. "The contamination wasn't an accident," he said without preamble, keeping his voice low. "And it wasn't you." "I know that," Sophia replied, "but apparently I'm the only one who does." James shook his head. "Not the only one. Some of us have been suspicious about the timing and nature of the contamination. It required both chemical knowledge and physical access, but also someone who wanted to discredit your work specifically." Sophia's mind immediately conjured Victoria Pierce's satisfied smile as security led her away. "Do you have proof?" "Not yet, but I've been reviewing the production logs." He pulled a small flash drive from his pocket. "Every person who enters the production floor has to badge in, and all ingredient additions are logged in the system. I downloaded the records from the past week." Sophia took the drive, hope flickering for the first time since her unceremonious removal. "Why are you helping me? You barely know me." James looked down, a flush spreading across his cheeks. "You treated me like a colleague from day one, not just some junior engineer. When everyone else was complaining about your changes disrupting their routines, you took time to explain the nutritional impact to me." He met her eyes. "And I grew up on food assistance. What you're doing matters." Emotion tightened Sophia's throat. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. We need to find evidence that will convince Mr. Donovan." James glanced at her scattered papers. "What have you figured out so far?" They spent the next 2 hours analyzing the production logs, mapping personnel movements against the timeline of the contamination. The pattern that emerged was troubling. "Look at this," Sophia said, pointing to a sequence of badge swipes. "Dr. Winters accessed the ingredient staging area at 2:14 a.m. on Tuesday, hours after the facility officially closed for the night." "That's unusual, but not damning," James replied. "She's the research director. She has 24/7 access." "But why would she need to personally access raw ingredients in the middle of the night?" Sophia pulled up another log. "And here, the system shows that specific mineral premix containers were opened during that time window. Those same minerals showed anomalous levels in the contaminated batch." James frowned. "Dr. Winters has been at NutraSolutions for 8 years. She's Alexander's most trusted scientist. And she opposed my reformulation from the beginning," Sophia added, the pieces aligning in her mind. "But sabotage seems extreme, even for professional jealousy. Maybe it's not just about you," James suggested cautiously. "There have been rumors. Dr. Winters and Victoria Pierce are close friends. Ms. Pierce has been pushing to delay the Humanitarian line entirely, arguing that we should focus on the premium consumer products with higher profit margins." Sophia remembered Victoria's dismissive comments during the board meeting. "This Humanitarian line is primarily about entering developing markets, not charity." If the first production run failed spectacularly, especially due to contamination linked to my reformulation, Sophia began. The entire humanitarian project could be shelved, James finished, and your influence would be eliminated. Sophia gathered the most compelling evidence, organizing it into a clear narrative. I need to show this to Alexander. Security won't let you leave, and they've blocked your communications, James reminded her. Then you'll have to take it to him, Sophia said, transferring the key files to the flash drive. Tonight, before they can cover their tracks further. James hesitated, conflict evident on his face. Mr. Donovan isn't easily accessible, especially after hours. And if I'm caught with this, your career could be over, Sophia acknowledged. I understand if you can't risk it, James squared his shoulders. Decision made. My mother raised me to do what's right, not what's safe. I'll find him. After James left, Sophia returned to her analysis, searching for any overlooked detail that might strengthen their case. Hours passed with no word. The city outside the windows grew quiet as midnight approached. Doubt crept in. Had James lost his courage? Had he been intercepted, or worse, had he taken her evidence directly to Dr. Winters? Just as exhaustion began to overcome her, the apartment door burst open. Alexander stood in the doorway, still in his business suit despite the late hour, his face taut with barely controlled anger. Behind him stood James, looking both nervous and relieved. "Show me everything," Alexander demanded without greeting, striding to the table where Sophia's analysis was spread out. "James gave me the overview, but I want to hear it from you." Sophia walked him through her findings methodically, keeping emotion out of her voice. Alexander listened without interruption, his expression darkening as the evidence mounted. "Why would Dr. Winters risk her position like this?" he asked when Sophia finished. "She's been with the company since the beginning." "Ask Victoria Pierce," Sophia replied. "They're working together. Dr. Winters may have executed the sabotage, but I suspect Miss Pierce orchestrated it." Alexander's jaw tightened. "That's a serious accusation against my chief marketing officer." "Check Victoria's calendar for the past month," James interjected. "She's had multiple private meetings with Archer Nutritech's CEO. They're our main competitor in the premium nutrition space." "You think she's planning to defect?" Alexander asked sharply. "I think she's ensuring her value to either company by sabotaging your humanitarian initiative," Sophia said. "She made it clear in the board meeting that she sees it as a distraction from profitable ventures." Alexander was silent for a long moment, processing the implications. Finally, he pulled out his phone. "Security. This is Donovan. I need a team at Dr. Winters' office and the laboratory immediately. Secure all computers and research samples, and locate Victoria Pierce." When he ended the call, he turned to Sophia, his expression softening for the first time since he'd entered. "I owe you an apology. I should have trusted you." "You had no reason to," Sophia replied simply. "You barely know me." "I know enough," Alexander countered, his gaze holding hers. "I knew you were brilliant and principled. I should have recognized that someone with your commitment to feeding the hungry would never sabotage nutrition meant for children." The sincerity in his voice made something inside Sophia's chest tighten. Before she could respond, his phone rang. The transformation in his expression as he listened was chilling, the momentary warmth vanishing beneath a mask of controlled fury. "They found traces of the contaminant in Dr. Winters' personal lab cabinet," he said, after ending the call. "And Victoria Pierce is attempting to board a private flight to Boston, where Archer Nutritech is headquartered." "What happens now?" Sophia asked quietly. Alexander's eyes met hers, determination replacing anger. "Now we fix this, together!" Dawn broke over San Francisco, painting the sky in watercolor hues of pink and gold, as Sophia stood in the production facility, overseeing the emergency cleanup operation. The contaminated batches had been quarantined and production lines meticulously sanitized under her direction. Employees moved with renewed purpose, the early hour and unexpected crisis offset by the gravity of what had nearly happened, tainted nutrition packets that could have harmed vulnerable children. Alexander worked alongside her, his suit jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up as he consulted with the facility manager on expedited quality control protocols. The corporate hierarchy had temporarily dissolved in the face of crisis, executives and line workers united in damage control. James coordinated with the engineering team, implementing enhanced security measures at Sophia's suggestion: dual authentication for ingredient access, continuous video monitoring of production stages, and tamper-evident seals. The new batch of pediatric formulation will be ready for testing by noon, Sophia reported, checking the production schedule. If all goes well, we can restart full production tomorrow. Alexander nodded, the shadows under his eyes betraying his sleepless night. After discovering the sabotage, he had personally led the confrontation with Dr. Winters, who ultimately crumbled under questioning and implicated Victoria in the scheme. Both women were now facing criminal charges and industrial espionage investigations. "You've been extraordinary," he said quietly, so only she could hear. Most people would have collapsed under the pressure or walked away after being falsely accused. Sophia shrugged, though the compliment warmed her. "Children would have suffered if this project failed. My pride isn't worth that." His gaze lingered on her face, seeing beyond her exhaustion to the determination that drove her. "You never asked what happened with Victoria and Dr. Winters." "I assumed you'd tell me when you were ready," she replied, adjusting a production parameter on the control panel. Alexander guided her toward a quieter corner of the facility floor, away from the bustle of workers. "Victoria confessed everything once she realized we had evidence. She's been negotiating with Archer Nutratech for months, promising to bring our research and delay our humanitarian initiative to give them market advantage. And Dr. Winters? Financial motivation primarily. Victoria offered her a significant research grant through a foundation she controls." His expression hardened. "But there was personal resentment too. Your arrival threatened her position as our leading nutrition expert." Sophia absorbed this, feeling a complex mixture of vindication and sadness, careers destroyed over professional jealousy and greed. "Their choices, not yours," Alexander reminded her gently. "The board is meeting this afternoon to discuss the situation and next steps." By mid-afternoon, the emergency had stabilized enough for Sophia to return to the company apartment for a desperately needed shower and change of clothes. She had just emerged, wrapping her damp hair in a towel, when a knock came at the door. A courier delivered a package containing her confiscated phone and a formal letter. The phone immediately lit up with missed calls and messages from her mother and Marcus at the food bank, frantic with worry over her unexplained absence. She sent quick reassuring texts promising to call soon, then turned her attention to the letter bearing the NutraSolutions logo. Inside was a formal offer. Director of Humanitarian Nutrition Initiatives, with a salary that made her breath catch. Plus, comprehensive benefits that included full medical coverage for dependents. A handwritten note in Alexander's distinctive script was paperclipped to the contract. The board approved unanimously. This isn't charity, it's recognition of exceptional talent. AD. Sophia sat on the edge of the bed, the contract trembling slightly in her hands. 1 week ago, she had been stretching dented cans of beans at a food bank, skipping meals to ensure others could eat, watching her mother suffer through pain because they couldn't afford proper treatment. Now, a single signature could transform everything. The enormity of the change threatened to overwhelm her. Would she still be the same person in this new life? Would power and privilege erode the empathy forged through hardship? And what about Alexander? Was her growing attraction to him genuine, or colored by gratitude and the intensity of shared crisis? A second knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts. This time, Alexander himself stood in the hallway, changed into fresh clothes, but still showing signs of their sleepless night. "May I come in?" he asked, his usual commanding presence softened by uncertainty. Sophia stepped aside, gesturing him in. "I received the offer." "And?" His eyes searched her face. "It's generous, extremely generous." She set the contract on the dining table. "Too generous, perhaps." Alexander frowned. "Your expertise and what you've contributed this week justify every penny." "It's not about the money," Sophia explained, struggling to articulate her conflicted feelings. "This week has been extraordinary, but also artificial. You plucked me from my normal life, dropped me into this rarefied world of private jets and corporate power plays. How do I know any of this is real, that I belong here?" "You belong wherever your talents can make the greatest difference," Alexander replied, moving closer. "At the food bank you helped hundreds. Here you'll impact millions." Sophia looked up at him, seeing beyond the powerful CEO to the man who had carried her unconscious form onto his private jet, who had defended her to his board, who had worked beside her through the night to salvage the Humanitarian project. "And us?" she asked quietly. "What's real there?" Alexander's expression softened. "I've built my life around calculated decisions, Sophia. Meeting you was the exception. The most unplanned, unexpected event in my carefully structured existence. When you fainted in that food bank, something changed. Watching you work, seeing your brilliance and compassion in equal measure. It awakened something I'd forgotten existed." He took her hand, his touch tentative, as if expecting her to pull away. "I'm not offering you this position to keep you close, though I won't deny I want that. I'm offering it because the world needs you in a position where your gifts can reach farther." Sophia didn't withdraw her hand, but doubt still shadowed her eyes. "How can I trust this isn't just the adrenaline of crisis and contrast? A week ago, you didn't know I existed." "A week ago, I was a different person," he admitted. "Seeing nutrition through your eyes, not just as science or business, but as human dignity and care, has changed my perspective. I can't return to viewing it simply as market share and profit margins." He gestured toward the contract on the table. "Take the position because it's right for you, not because of any feelings between us. Those can evolve naturally, without professional pressure." Sophia studied him, seeing sincerity in his steady gaze. The Alexander Donovan who had first entered the food bank, arrogant, demanding, coldly efficient, had transformed through their shared journey. Or perhaps he had simply revealed layers that existed beneath the corporate armor. "I need to speak with my mother," she said finally, "and visit the food bank to properly transition my responsibilities. I can't abandon the people who depend on me there." Hope lit Alexander's features. "Of course, we can arrange for you to return to Portland tomorrow. Take whatever time you need to settle your affairs. And the Humanitarian initiative will proceed. With your formulations, James can oversee implementation until you return, if you return." He emphasized the last words, making it clear the choice remained entirely hers. Sophia picked up the contract, a smile finally breaking through her serious expression. "I'm coming back, Alexander. We have millions of people to feed, and I'm not trusting anyone else with those formulations." Relief and something deeper crossed his face. He stepped closer, his hand gently brushing her cheek. "I was hoping you'd say that." The space between them charged with unspoken possibilities, professional partnership, friendship, and perhaps something more meaningful that had begun to take root amid crisis and revelation. Sophia felt herself drawn toward him, the connection between them, transcending their different worlds. "We should get back to the production facility," she said softly, not yet ready to define what was growing between them. "Those pediatric formulations need our attention." Alexander nodded, understanding. Her need for space and time. Together, then? Together, Sophia agreed, gathering her strength for the work ahead and for the new life unfolding before her, rich with purpose and unexpected connection. 1 year later, Sophia stood at the large windows of her office on the 28th floor of NutraSolutions headquarters, watching fog roll across San Francisco Bay. The view still took her breath away sometimes, a visual reminder of how dramatically her life had transformed. The wall behind her desk displayed framed photographs telling the story of that transformation, her mother smiling beside her at Sophia's graduation ceremony, where she'd finally received her master's degree, the ribbon cutting at the first NutraSolutions Community Nutrition Center in Portland, Sophia and Alexander in Ghana, surrounded by children receiving the specialized nutrition packets she had formulated. A knock at her office door drew her attention from the view. James entered, now promoted to lead production engineer, carrying a tablet and wearing an expression of barely contained excitement. "The preliminary data from the Nigeria distribution is in," he announced, handing her the tablet. 3 months of consistent supplementation with your specialized regional formulation has reduced childhood malnutrition rates by 27% in the test communities. Sophia scanned the data, a surge of professional satisfaction warming her chest. "The micronutrient absorption rates are even better than we projected. The cultural adaptation team was right about incorporating local ingredients. It's improved both acceptability and bioavailability. The board is impressed," James added. Even Harrington admitted the regional customization was worth the investment. Sophia smiled at the mention of the once skeptical board member who had become one of her strongest advocates. "We've proven that nutrition isn't one size fits all. Respecting cultural food traditions isn't just ethically right, it's scientifically sound." Her phone chimed with a calendar reminder, lunch with Marcus from Harvest Community Food Bank, who was visiting San Francisco to finalize plans for expanding their partnership. Under Sophia's direction, NutraSolutions had established a network of community nutrition centers across the country, starting with the food bank where she had once worked. The centers provided not just emergency food assistance, but nutrition, education, and specialized support for vulnerable populations. "I should get going," she told James. "Can you compile these results for the executive committee meeting tomorrow? I want to make a case for accelerating the Southeast Asia initiative." As she gathered her things, her eyes caught on a small silver sculpture on her desk. A miniature engine like the one Alexander had first given her as a ring, now enlarged and mounted on a polished base. It had been his gift on her 1-year anniversary with the company, inscribed with words that still made her heart beat faster. "To the woman who engineered change, in our company and in me." Their relationship had evolved gradually after her return from Portland, where she had settled her affairs and helped her mother move to San Francisco. Professional collaboration had deepened into friendship, then blossomed into something more profound during late nights, working on the Humanitarian initiative and weekend hikes in the hills above the city. Alexander had been patient, careful, to ensure their personal connection developed separately from their professional relationship. The elevator descended smoothly to the lobby, where Sophia found Marcus waiting, his face breaking into a wide grin at the sight of her. The food bank director looked exactly as she remembered, kind eyes, salt and pepper beard, and a worn jacket that had seen better days. "Look at you," he said, embracing her warmly. "Corporate executive changing the world. Always knew you were meant for bigger things than sorting dented cans." "I couldn't have done it without the foundation you gave me," Sophia replied sincerely. "The food bank taught me what really matters in nutrition: dignity, accessibility, and cultural relevance. I carry those lessons into every project here. Over lunch at a small bistro near headquarters, they discussed the expansion of the Portland Nutrition Center, which now serve twice as many people with specialized nutrition programs developed by Sophia's team. "The diabetes management program has been transformative," Marcus reported. "People who've struggled for years are finally stabilizing their blood sugar because they have access to appropriate food and education." "And the children's weekend backpack and program?" Sophia asked, particularly proud of the initiative that provided nutritionally complete meals for schoolchildren to take home. "Full enrollment with a waiting list. Test scores are up among participants. Turns out kids learn better when they're not hungry," Marcus said with a wry smile. "Your personal touch makes a difference, you know. When people hear these programs were designed by someone who once stood in the same lines they're standing in." Sophia nodded, understanding the power of that connection. She had insisted that her background be included in the public materials about NutraSolutions' humanitarian initiatives, believing transparency built trust with the communities they served. After lunch, Sophia walked Marcus to the company's product development kitchen, where they were testing new shelf-stable formulations for emergency response situations. As they toured the facility, a familiar voice called her name. Alexander approached, having just concluded a meeting with international distribution partners. He greeted Marcus warmly before turning to Sophia, his eyes softening in the way reserved, only for her. "How was your lunch?" he asked. "Productive," she replied with a smile. "Marcus brings good news from Portland." "I was just telling Sophia that her personal involvement gives our programs credibility," Marcus explained. "When people learn that the director of these initiatives once experienced food insecurity herself, it changes their perception." Alexander's expression grew serious. "That authenticity is the heart of what we're building. Sophia has transformed how we approach nutrition at every level." As they continued the tour, Sophia noticed Marcus observing her and Alexander with knowing eyes. The connection between them was visible even in professional settings, a shared glance, the subtle way they occupied space together, the seamless completion of each other's thoughts when explaining complex initiatives. Later, as she walked Marcus to the lobby, he chuckled softly. "So, you and Alexander Donovan?" Sophia felt a blush warm her cheeks. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who knows you both," Marcus assured her. "He's not what I expected when you first told me about the arrogant CEO who whisked you away on his private jet." "He's changed," Sophia said simply. "We both have." "I can see that." "Just promise me something," Marcus said, his expression turning serious. "Don't lose touch with what brought you here. The understanding of what hunger really means, what people really need." "That's your superpower, Sophia." "I promise," she replied, hugging him goodbye. "Some experiences change you forever. Hunger is one of them." That evening, Sophia and Alexander stood on the balcony of his penthouse apartment, the city lights twinkling below them. She had just shared the promising data from Nigeria, and they were celebrating with glasses of champagne. "A 27% reduction in malnutrition," Alexander mused, gazing out at the horizon. "When I started NutraSolutions, it was about market share and profit margins. I never imagined making this kind of difference." "You had the resources and infrastructure," Sophia reminded him. "You just needed a different perspective." He turned to her, his expression thoughtful. "A perspective I would never have encountered if you hadn't fainted that day." "If I hadn't been starving, you mean," she corrected gently. "Let's not romanticize it." Alexander set down his glass, taking her hands in his. I'm not romanticizing, Sophia. I'm acknowledging that sometimes the most transformative forces enter our lives through unexpected doors. You collapsed from hunger, and I carried you onto my jet thinking I was solving a temporary problem. Instead, you completely redirected my life's work. Sophia squeezed his hands, remembering the journey that had brought them here. From suspicion to trust, from professional respect to deep personal connection. We redirected each other. You gave me the platform to impact millions instead of hundreds. You gave me purpose beyond profit, he countered, pulling her closer, a better measure of success. As the fog rolled in, enveloping the city in its soft embrace, Sophia rested her head against Alexander's shoulder, grateful for the strange twist of fate that had brought them together. One moment of weakness, her body giving out after days of self-neglect, had created an opening for strength she never imagined possessing. The power to transform not just her own life, but the lives of vulnerable people around the world. "What are you thinking about?" Alexander asked softly, his arm warm around her waist. "How sometimes our greatest challenges lead to our greatest opportunities," she replied. "If I hadn't been hungry that day, if you hadn't been there at that exact moment, then I would have remained an arrogant CEO who thought he understood. Nutrition because he could read a spreadsheet," Alexander finished, a smile in his voice. "And you would have continued stretching inadequate resources at the food bank, your brilliance limited by circumstance." Sophia looked up at him, at the face that had become so dear to her. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't carried me onto that jet?" "I don't need to wonder," he said simply. "I would have missed the most important connection of my life, professionally and personally. Some moments define us, Sophia. That was ours. In the gentle fog embracing the city, they stood together, hunger transformed into purpose, arrogance into humility, and an accidental meeting into a partnership that was changing the world, one meal at a time." 1 year later, Sophia stood at the large windows of her office on the 28th floor of NutraSolutions headquarters, watching fog roll across San Francisco Bay. The view still took her breath away sometimes, a visual reminder of how dramatically her life had transformed. The wall behind her desk displayed framed photographs telling the story of that transformation. Her mother, smiling beside her at Sophia's graduation ceremony, where she'd finally received her master's degree, the ribbon cutting at the first NutraSolutions Community Nutrition Center in Portland, Sophia and Alexander in Ghana, surrounded by children receiving the specialized nutrition packets she had formulated. A knock at her office door drew her attention from the view. James entered, now promoted to lead production engineer, carrying a tablet and wearing an expression of barely contained excitement. "The preliminary data from the Nigeria distribution is in," he announced, handing her the tablet. 3 months of consistent supplementation with your specialized regional formulation has reduced childhood malnutrition rates by 27% in the test communities." Sophia scanned the data, a surge of professional satisfaction warming her chest. "The micronutrient absorption rates are even better than we projected. The cultural adaptation team was right about incorporating local ingredients. It's improved both acceptability and bioavailability. The board is impressed," James added. Even Harrington admitted the regional customization was worth the investment. Sophia smiled at the mention of the once skeptical board member who had become one of her strongest advocates. "We've proven that nutrition isn't one size fits all. Respecting cultural food traditions isn't just ethically right, it's scientifically sound." Her phone chimed with a calendar reminder. Lunch with Marcus from Harvest Community Food Bank, who was visiting San Francisco to finalize plans for expanding their partnership. Under Sophia's direction, NutraSolutions had established a network of community nutrition centers across the country, starting with the food bank where she had once worked. The centers provided not just emergency food assistance, but nutrition, education, and specialized support for vulnerable populations. I should get going, she told James. Can you compile these results for the executive committee meeting tomorrow? I want to make a case for accelerating the Southeast Asia initiative. As she gathered her things, her eyes caught on a small silver sculpture on her desk, a miniature engine like the one Alexander had first given her as a ring, now enlarged and mounted on a polished base. It had been his gift on her one-year anniversary with the company, inscribed with words that still made her heart beat faster. To the woman who engineered change, in our company and in me. Their relationship had evolved gradually after her return from Portland, where she had settled her affairs and helped her mother move to San Francisco. Professional collaboration had deepened into friendship, then blossomed into something more profound during late nights, working on the Humanitarian initiative and weekend hikes in the hills above the city. Alexander had been patient, careful, to ensure their personal connection developed separately from their professional relationship. The elevator descended smoothly to the lobby, where Sophia found Marcus waiting, his face breaking into a wide grin at the sight of her. The food bank director looked exactly as she remembered, kind eyes, salt and pepper beard, and a worn jacket that had seen better days. "Look at you," he said, embracing her warmly. "Corporate executive changing the world. Always knew you were meant for bigger things than sorting dented cans." "I couldn't have done it without the foundation you gave me," Sophia replied sincerely. "The food bank taught me what really matters in nutrition. Dignity, accessibility, cultural relevance. I carry those lessons into every project here." Over lunch, at a small bistro near headquarters, they discussed the expansion of the Portland Nutrition Center, which now served twice as many people with specialized nutrition. Programs developed by Sophia's team. "The diabetes management program has been transformative," Marcus reported. "People who've struggled for years are finally stabilizing their blood sugar because they have access to appropriate food and education." "And the children's weekend backpack program?" Sophia asked, particularly proud of the initiative that provided nutritionally complete meals for school children to take home. "Full enrollment with a waiting list. Test scores are up among participants. Turns out kids learn better when they're not hungry," Marcus said with a wry smile. "Your personal touch makes a difference, you know. When people hear these programs were designed by someone who once stood in the same lines they're standing in." Sophia nodded, understanding the power of that connection. She had insisted that her background be included in the public materials about NutraSolutions' humanitarian initiatives, believing transparency built trust with the communities they served. As the afternoon sun bathed San Francisco in golden light, Sophia and Marcus made their way to the harbor, where a special event was underway, the christening of the first NutraSolutions humanitarian supply vessel. The ship would transport specialized nutrition formulations to crisis regions worldwide, reaching communities where traditional supply chains failed. Alexander stood on the dock beside the gleaming white vessel, surrounded by media and NutraSolutions executives. His face brightened upon seeing Sophia approach. She noticed with affection how he still straightened his tie whenever she came into view, a nervous habit that betrayed the powerful CEO's vulnerability around her. "Just in time," his heart murmured as she took her place beside him. "I wasn't going to christen this ship without its inspiration." The ceremony proceeded with speeches celebrating the company's expanded humanitarian mission. When it was Sophia's turn to speak, she stepped forward, the sea breeze catching her hair as cameras flashed. "This vessel represents more than transportation. Logistics," she began, her voice clear and confident in a way that still sometimes surprised her. "It embodies our belief that nutrition is a fundamental right, not a privilege. 1 year ago, I was managing a food bank, stretching dented cans to feed as many hungry people as possible. Today, we're launching a ship that will deliver scientifically formulated nutrition to the world's most vulnerable populations." She paused, looking at Alexander with gratitude. This transformation wasn't just mine. It was NutraSolutions, led by a CEO willing to redefine success beyond profit margins. Together, we've proven that doing good and doing well aren't mutually exclusive. After the applause died down and the ceremonial bottle was broken across the bow, Alexander pulled Sophia aside, away from the crowd and cameras. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his pocket. Instead of the small box she half expected, he withdrew a folded document. Sophia opened it to find architectural plans labeled NutraSolutions Research Institute for Humanitarian Nutrition. "The board approved it this morning," Alexander explained, eyes bright with excitement. "A dedicated research facility focused entirely on humanitarian nutrition challenges, drought-resistant formulations, crisis response nutrition, maternal and infant health in resource-limited settings. We need a director with both scientific expertise and real-world understanding." "Alexander," she breathed, scanning the ambitious plans. "This is your vision made concrete," he finished. "You've transformed how we think about nutrition. This institute ensures that transformation outlasts both of us." As the significance of his gift sank in, Sophia realized he was offering her more than a professional opportunity. He was offering a legacy. Later that evening, they walked along the waterfront, the newly christened ship illuminated against the darkening sky. Alexander seemed uncharacteristically quiet, almost nervous. "What's on your mind?" Sophia asked, linking her arm through his. "You've been distracted since the ceremony." He stopped walking, turning to face her with an intensity that caught her breath. "The Institute wasn't the only thing I wanted to give you today." This time, he did reach for a small box in his pocket. The ring inside wasn't the ostentatious diamond she might have expected from a billionaire CEO, but a band of intertwined silver and gold, studded with tiny sapphires the color of the ocean behind them. "1 year ago, I gave you a ring pull from a can as a symbol of what we could build together," Alexander said, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. "You transformed that humble beginning into something extraordinary. Now, I'm asking if you'll continue that transformation as partners in every sense." Sophia looked from the ring to the man holding it, the arrogant CEO who had carried her unconscious form onto his jet, who had defended her to his board, who had worked beside her through the night to salvage their humanitarian project. The man who had learned to see the world through her eyes and had become better for it. "Yes," she said simply, holding out her hand. "Partners in everything." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, the ship's horn sounded in the harbor. A coincidence that made them both laugh with the perfect timing of it. "I think we have the universe's approval," Alexander said, pulling her close. Standing there in the gathering dusk, Sophia marveled at the journey that had brought them to this moment. 1 year ago, she had been stretching resources at a food bank, skipping meals to ensure others could eat. Now she stood on the threshold of a future she could never have imagined, leading a global research institute, engaged to a man who had recognized her value when she couldn't afford to eat, building a life dedicated to ensuring no one else experienced the hunger she had known. As they walked back toward the city lights, arm in arm, Sophia felt a sense of completion. Her past hadn't been erased by success, it had been transformed into purpose. The hunger that had once weakened her body had strengthened her resolve. The experience of need had become the foundation for abundance that she now shared with the world. "What are you thinking?" Alexander asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. Sophia smiled, squeezing his hand where it held hers. That sometimes the greatest journeys begin with a single step, or in our case, with a fainting spell and "A can of beans." Alexander laughed, the sound warm in the cool evening air. "I prefer to think of it as destiny disguised as accident." "Either way," Sophia replied, looking out at the harbor where their ship waited to carry nutrition to hungry children across the world. I'm grateful for how our story unfolded. As night fell over San Francisco, lights twinkled on across the city like stars coming out one by one. For Sophia and Alexander, they represented possibility, each light a reminder of lives that could be transformed through the simple yet profound gift of proper nutrition. Their journey, which had begun with hunger and arrogance, had blossomed into a partnership built on respect, purpose, and love, proving that the most unlikely beginnings sometimes lead to the most extraordinary endings. And as they walked into their shared future, they carried with them the lesson at the heart of their story. That true nourishment feeds not just the body, but the soul, and that sometimes the greatest transformations come from the most unexpected sources.